The night my life turned to ashes, I learned that silence can be louder than screams. I can still smell the smoke when I close my eyes. It creeps into my dreams, thick and choking, like the memory that refuses to die. One moment I was stirring my afternoon coffee, and the next, my whole world was on fire. It started so quietly. A faint burning smell, like dust on a heater. I remember thinking, maybe I left the stove on. I walked into the living room, and that's when I saw it. The orange glow licking up the curtains, climbing higher and faster than my mind could process. For 3 long seconds, I couldn't move. The air shimmered with heat. The sound of crackling would fill the room like the growl of some hungry beast. Then instinct took over. I ran. The smoke detector was silent. Later, I'd learned the battery had been dead for months, a tiny mistake that cost me 42 years of my life. I tried calling 911, but the smoke was already thick, curling around my head, making it impossible to breathe or think. Glass shattered somewhere behind me, maybe a window, maybe the picture frame with Robert's smile. My husband's portrait. My hand reached for it, but the flames were faster. I grabbed my purse, the one thing near me that wasn't yet burning, and bolted through the back door. As I stumbled into the yard, coughing, eyes streaming, I turned back and saw our home, my home, being devoured. The fire danced across the walls where I'd once marked my son's height in pencil. It roared through the kitchen, where I'd cooked thousands of dinners. It took everything. Mrs. Jenkins, my 78-year-old neighbor, ran toward me, her old robe flapping in the wind. "Grace? Oh Lord, Grace." She wrapped her arms around me as the sirens grew louder. But by the time the fire trucks arrived, it was too late. An hour later, there was nothing left but smoke, ruin, and memories melting into ash. The fire chief, his face streaked with soot, looked at me with pity that cut deeper than any wound. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "We did everything we could." He didn't need to finish. The blackened skeleton of my house said it all. 40 years, gone. The table where David did his homework. The bed Robert and I shared for nearly 4 decades. The photo albums, the Christmas decorations, the letters we'd written when we were young. All of it, gone. That night, Mrs. Jenkins offered her couch. Sweet woman, but her apartment was full of visiting grandchildren. I sat on the edge of her floral sofa, staring at the wall, feeling like a ghost in someone else's story. The Red Cross had a shelter, they said, but I couldn't bring myself to sleep among strangers. That's when I thought of David. My son. My only child. He lived 40 minutes away, in Valentine, one of those perfect neighborhoods where lawns look manicured by angels. I hadn't been there in a while. We weren't close anymore, not since his father died. But family is family. When the world burns down around you, where else do you go? I borrowed Mrs. Jenkins' phone. "David, darling," I said, my voice trembling more than I wanted. "Mom? What's wrong? You sound upset." "There was a fire, son. The house, it's gone." There was silence. A long one. "Were you hurt?" "No," I whispered. "Just smoke, that's all. I need a place to stay for a bit. Just until I figure things out." Another pause. Then, "Sure, Mom. Come on over. We'll work it out." I cried then, quiet, exhausted tears of relief. My boy would take care of me. He always had a good heart. Maybe we'd even reconnect. Maybe losing the house would bring us closer. I spent the next morning staring at the ruins, waiting for the insurance man. He was young, polite, and entirely detached. "Total loss," he said, clicking photos like he was documenting a science project. How much? I asked. Maybe 90,000 after depreciation. 90,000. For a lifetime. Mrs. Jenkins took me shopping for clothes with the Red Cross money. 2 shirts, a pair of jeans, a toothbrush, a coat. It all fit into one borrowed suitcase. That's what 42 years had become, one suitcase and a handful of memories. When the cab pulled into David's driveway, my heart started to hammer. His house was perfect, the kind of place that smelled like success and expensive candles. The red door gleamed like it had been painted yesterday. I sat in the back seat for a minute, gripping the handle of my suitcase. This is temporary, I told myself. Just until the insurance clears. Just until I get back on my feet. But when the front door opened, I felt something cold twist in my stomach. David looked surprised to see me, even though he knew I was coming. Behind him stood Victoria, the fiancée. Beautiful, polished, and about as warm as a marble countertop. Grace, she said sweetly. How horrible about your house. But her eyes didn't meet mine. They landed on my worn suitcase instead. I stepped inside, feeling out of place in their spotless home. The marble floor gleamed. Everything was white, white walls, white sofas, white life. I sat carefully, afraid to wrinkle the air. So, Mom, David said, sitting across from me, not beside me. What's the plan? The insurance will take a few weeks, I said. I just need to stay here until then. I'll help around the house, of course. Cook, clean, whatever you need. He glanced at Victoria. That one look told me everything. Mom, he began, his voice hesitant. Victoria and I, we really value our privacy. This is our home, our space. I wouldn't be in your way, I said quickly. I'll keep to myself. Victoria smiled, soft, fake. It's not about that, Grace. It's just, you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. There are nice extended stay places nearby. Clean. Safe. I stared at her, then at my son, my baby, who couldn't even meet my eyes. You think I'd be happier in a hotel room? I asked quietly. David shifted. I can help you with the cost. A few $100, maybe. A few $100. For the woman who raised him, who sat up through his fevers, who held him when his first love broke his heart. I see, I said, standing slowly. My knees trembled, but my voice did not. You want me gone? Mom, please don't make it sound like that, he said. We just think this arrangement won't work for anyone. I looked around their flawless home, the photos of them on the mantel, none of me. I felt invisible. You're right, I said finally. There are always options. I picked up my suitcase. It felt heavier than before, full of loss instead of clothes. David followed me to the door. I'll call you in a few days, okay? Don't bother, I said. I wouldn't want to invade your sanctuary. Outside, the air felt colder. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, staring at the house where my son had just closed the door on me. Through the window, I saw them talking, probably about how dramatic I was being. That night, I checked into a cheap motel near the highway. The room smelled of smoke and loneliness. The wallpaper peeled at the corners like it was trying to escape. I sat on the hard bed, staring at my suitcase, wondering where a 65-year-old woman goes when the world stops wanting her. And then I remembered it, a small, faded business card I'd kept for 40 years. Randall Galloway. My first love. The one who once promised, I'll come back for you, Grace. He never did. But maybe I'd finally go back for him. Sometimes the only way forward is back, to the person you once were, and the one who still waits in memory. The morning I decided to call Randall, the sky was gray, heavy with rain. The kind of weather that seems to echo your heart. I'd been awake since 5 a.m., lying on the thin motel mattress, staring at the ceiling fan that wobbled with each slow turn. My body felt stiff, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames, orange and alive, swallowing everything I'd ever loved. It had been 3 nights since David turned me away. I kept replaying that moment, his eyes full of guilt, Victoria's perfectly calm voice. I wanted to hate her, but the truth was, she didn't do anything David didn't allow. The rejection came from both of them, and it burned worse than the fire. I sat at the little table in the corner of the room and opened my purse. Inside was the old business card, soft and yellowed from time. Randall Galloway. The ink was faded, but the name was still clear. On the back, in my own handwriting from 4 decades ago, were the words, "Never forget G." I remembered the day I wrote it. I was 25, barefoot, sitting on the porch of my parents' house. Randall had just kissed me goodbye, saying he was leaving for a project in Atlanta. He'd promised to return, to build a life with me once he made something of himself. I'd believed him. Completely. Because that's what you do when you're 25 and in love, you believe. But life had other plans. Robert came along, steady and safe, and Randall became a memory I tucked away in the corner of my heart. Still, I never threw that card away. I kept it through marriage, motherhood, widowhood, every chapter. Maybe I'd known, deep down, that one day I'd need it. Now, 40 years later, my hands shook as I held it. What would I even say? Hi, remember me? I'm the woman you left behind, and I just lost everything I own. I laughed out loud at the absurdity, but it came out sounding more like a sob. Then I did what I hadn't done in years, I prayed. God, if this is crazy, stop me. But if it's meant, please let him answer. The motel phone felt cold against my ear. I dialed the number slowly, half expecting to hear a disconnected tone. Instead, it rang. Once. Twice. Then a deep, steady voice, older, rougher, but unmistakably his. Randall Galloway speaking. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The sound of his voice swept me back to that hill overlooking the city, to the nights we'd talked about dreams and forever. I pressed a hand to my chest, as if to hold my heart in place. Randall, it's Grace. There was silence, just the faint hum of static on the line. Then, softly. Grace Taylor. Yes, I whispered. Well, I'll be damned. His voice cracked, but it wasn't anger, it was disbelief. It's been what, 40 years? 40, give or take, I said with a small, shaky laugh. I didn't think you'd even remember me. Grace, I could never forget you. Those words hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent years convincing myself I was forgettable, first to Robert's steady love, then to my son's cold distance. Hearing Randall say that felt like someone breathing air into my soul. What made you call? He asked. His tone was gentle, cautious. I could picture him leaning back, trying to understand why the ghost of his past had come calling. There was a fire, I said. My throat tightened. I lost my house. Everything. He was silent again. Then, are you safe? Yes. For now. Where are you? Charlotte. In a motel off I-85. I expected him to say I'm sorry, or that's terrible, but instead he said something that made me pause. Grace, pack your things. I'm sending a car for you. What? No, Randall, that's not. He cut me off. You've been through hell. You're not staying in a cheap motel. I won't allow it. The firmness in his voice startled me. It was the same tone he'd used back when he was young and full of certainty, when he'd told me he'd build a life for us. And for the first time in a long while, someone sounded like they cared what happened to me. Randall, I can't just. Grace, he said again, softer this time, please. Let me do this. I hesitated. Pride is a funny thing. It keeps you standing tall when your knees want to buckle. But pride doesn't keep you warm at night. Finally, I whispered, all right. He exhaled, and I heard a faint tremor in his breath. Good. I'll send a driver within 2 hours. My address is in Belmont Ridge, you'll see the gate. Don't argue. Just come. Belmont Ridge. The wealthiest part of town. I'd seen those homes on the news, mansions behind iron gates, driveways lined with trees and fountains. The thought of seeing him again, after all these years, made my heart race, with equal parts fear, and something dangerously close to hope. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. Could it really be that simple? One call, and my life might change again. 2 hours later, a black Mercedes pulled up in front of the motel. The driver, a polite man in a suit, opened the door and said, Miss Taylor. Mr. Galloway is expecting you. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it, me, in my thrift store coat, being picked up like some socialite. I looked around the shabby parking lot one last time, then stepped into the car. The ride felt endless. The city gave way to wide open roads, then to rolling hills. As we approached Belmont Ridge, the world around me transformed. Grand iron gates, sprawling estates, manicured gardens. Everything screamed wealth and distance from ordinary pain. When the car turned up a long driveway lined with oak trees, my palms started sweating. At the top stood a mansion, 3 stories, with wide white columns and a wraparound porch. The kind of home you see in glossy magazines, not in a 65-year-old widow's story. The driver opened my door. His waiting inside. I climbed the steps slowly. My legs trembled, not from age this time, but from nerves. When the door finally opened, there he was. Randall Galloway. Older, of course. His hair had turned silver at the temples, his face lined in ways that only time and hard work could carve. But his eyes, the same amber eyes I'd fallen in love with, still held that spark of warmth and certainty. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, 2 people bound by 40 years of silence. Then he smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent shivers through me. Grace, he said, voice deep and calm. And then, just 3 words that made my knees go weak. You finally came home. I didn't know it then, but those words would change everything. Some doors don't just open, they pull you into a life you thought you'd buried. When I stepped into Randall's house, the first thing that hit me wasn't the size, it was the silence. The kind of quiet that money buys, thick and controlled. The air smelled faintly of cedar and lemon polish. Every surface gleamed. The floors were marble, the ceilings impossibly high, and yet, it didn't feel alive. It felt like a museum of someone's success. Come in, he said softly, his voice carrying that same steady confidence I remembered from a lifetime ago. You must be freezing. I was. The wind outside had bitten through my thin coat, but I hadn't noticed until he mentioned it. He took my suitcase, setting it gently by the staircase, then motioned for me to follow him down a wide hall. My shoes clicked against the polished floor. Family portraits lined the walls, but none of them were his. They were landscapes, art pieces, images of places instead of people. That told me everything I needed to know about how Randall had lived. He led me into a sitting room, where a fire burned inside an enormous stone fireplace. The flames glowed against dark mahogany shelves filled with books. I sat on the edge of a leather armchair that probably cost more than my old car. He poured 2 glasses of wine from a decanter and handed me one. To survival, he said. And to second chances. I raised the glass, my hand trembling slightly. Second chances, I echoed. The warmth of the fire seeped into me, but my heart still raced. I studied him while pretending not to. His shoulders were broader now, his hair silver but still thick. His hands, strong, steady, capable. The kind of hands that had once built things. The kind that had once held me. It's strange, I said quietly. After all these years, you look almost exactly the same. He chuckled, shaking his head. If only that were true. Life's done its carving. Then his eyes met mine, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. You though, you look exactly like I remember. Just, softer around the edges. Wiser. Stronger. I wanted to tell him that strength wasn't a choice. It was what you're left with when there's no one else to catch you. But instead, I smiled. That's kind of you. He studied me for a beat longer, then said, you always had that look in your eyes, like you were watching life happen, even when it was happening to you. That made me laugh softly. I suppose I was. Watching, waiting, hoping. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. What happened, Grace? Why didn't we? The question hung in the air, unfinished but understood. Life happened, I said simply. You left. I waited. Then Robert came along. At the mention of Robert, something flickered in his eyes, not jealousy, but regret. I heard you married, he said. He was a good man. He was, I nodded. Steady. Kind. We had our years. He passed away 8 years ago. I'm sorry. Thank you. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of things unsaid, 4 decades of them. Finally, I set my glass down and sighed. I didn't call you for sympathy, Randall. I just didn't know where else to go. He stood, walked over to the window, and looked out at the sprawling garden beyond. The firelight reflected in the glass, framing his silhouette like a painting. You don't need to explain, he said. You needed a place, and I'm glad you called me. It's strange, isn't it? How the people we think we've lost come back when we need them most. Do you live here alone? I asked carefully. He turned, smiling faintly. Mostly. There's staff who come during the day, groundskeeper, housekeeper, driver, but they leave by evening. I like the quiet. That sounds lonely. He shrugged. It's peaceful. After a lifetime of noise, peace is expensive. Something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. I could hear the weight behind the words, the cost of everything he'd built. He led me upstairs to a guest room that looked more like a suite at a luxury hotel. Soft cream walls, a 4-poster bed, curtains the color of champagne. I ran my hand along the quilt, feeling almost guilty touching something so pristine. This is too much, I whispered. He shook his head. Nonsense. You deserve to rest somewhere safe. Randall, I hesitated. Why are you doing this for me? After all this time? He looked at me for a long moment before answering. Because 40 years ago, I made you a promise. And I never stopped thinking about it. I felt the air leave my lungs. You remember that? I remember everything, Grace. He smiled sadly. You think I built all this for me? No. I built it for the girl who believed in me before anyone else did. For the life we never had. My throat tightened. I looked away, blinking fast. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not, he said softly. But maybe I owe myself the chance to do something right. He left me then, saying he'd have dinner brought up. I sat on the bed, staring at the suitcase by the door. It hit me that for the first time since the fire, I felt safe. But also, something else, something I hadn't felt in years. A faint flicker of hope. Dangerous, foolish hope. That night, after dinner, I wandered downstairs. The house was dim, quiet except for the faint crackle of the fire. Randall was sitting at the piano, his fingers moving slowly over the keys. I didn't know he played. The melody was soft, almost sad, like the sound of remembering. He looked up when he saw me. Couldn't sleep. Not yet. I smiled faintly. Didn't expect to find you playing. He chuckled. It's the only thing that still makes sense some nights. I walked closer. It's beautiful. It's unfinished, he said. Like everything in my life. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw it. The years hadn't dulled what we once had. It was still there, buried under time, loss, and circumstance. The ache of what could have been. Grace, he said softly, you don't have to stay in a motel again. Not ever. You have a place here as long as you want it. I wanted to say no, to cling to pride, to independence, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just whispered, thank you. He nodded once, stood, and took my hand gently. His touch was warm, steady, familiar. Get some rest, he said. You're home now. But as I climbed the stairs that night, something inside me trembled, not from fear, but from the unsettling realization that my story wasn't ending here. It was beginning again. And somewhere deep down, I wondered what price I'd pay this time for coming home. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight pouring through lace curtains. For a second, I didn't know where I was. The sheets were soft, the air smelled faintly of roses, and birds were singing outside. Then it hit me, I wasn't home. I didn't have a home. I was in Randall's mansion. Someone had left a tray outside my door. Fresh coffee, warm croissants, a small vase with a single white lily. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling both touched and out of place. The last time someone brought me breakfast in bed was probably 30 years ago, back when Robert was alive, and David was still small enough to climb into our bed on Sunday mornings. When I went downstairs, I found Randall in the kitchen. Or what I assumed was the kitchen. It was bigger than my entire first floor used to be. He was reading something on his tablet, glasses perched on the edge of his nose, a coffee mug in hand. The sight made me smile. You're up early, he said, glancing up. Sleep well. Like a rock, I lied. I'd barely slept at all. Too many thoughts, too many memories. He motioned toward the seat across from him. Eat something. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks. I sat, taking a small sip of coffee. You always did like to give orders, I teased. And you always liked to ignore them, he shot back, smiling. For a second, it felt like we were 25 again. But then his phone buzzed. His expression shifted, just slightly, but enough for me to notice. He glanced at the screen, frowned, then turned it face down. Everything okay? I asked. Business, he said quickly. It never really stops. He changed the subject then, asking about the fire, about my insurance, about David. I tried to keep my voice steady as I told him what happened, but when I mentioned my son turning me away, Randall's jaw tightened. He did what? He said his fiancée needed space. Privacy. Randall set his coffee down, hard. Grace, he's your son. I know, I said softly. But sometimes love doesn't survive expectations. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he just nodded, his eyes dark with something between anger and sorrow. You deserve better than that. For the rest of the day, he busied himself, calls, meetings, walking the grounds. I stayed mostly in my room, still trying to understand the strange comfort I felt in this place. It was beautiful, yes, but there was a heaviness to it too, like the walls were keeping secrets. That evening, I decided to explore. The house was too big to feel like home. It felt like it belonged to someone who needed to fill silence with square footage. I wandered through wide halls lined with art, down to the library again. The shelves were full of books, philosophy, architecture, biographies, but one section caught my eye: old photo albums stacked neatly on a lower shelf. I pulled one out, curiosity winning over hesitation. The first few pages were filled with pictures of construction sites, blueprints, newspaper clippings. Galloway Developments opens new tower downtown. Randall Galloway, from builder's son to business tycoon. Page after page of achievements, but not a single personal photo. Not one face. Until I found her. A woman. Younger than me, beautiful, with auburn hair and a soft smile. There was a photo of her standing next to Randall at what looked like a charity gala. His arm around her waist. Her hand on his chest. The caption underneath read, "With Eleanor Gray, partner and friend." Partner. I stared at it, my stomach tightening. Partner in business. Or something else. Grace? His voice startled me. I shut the album too fast, my hands clumsy. He stood at the doorway, watching me. You found the archives, he said, his tone unreadable. I'm sorry, I blurted. I shouldn't have. It's fine, he said, walking closer. He took the album gently from my hands, his fingers brushing mine. Eleanor helped me start the company. She was my right hand for 20 years. She's beautiful, I said quietly. He nodded. She was. She passed away 6 years ago. Cancer. I swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Randall. I didn't know. He sighed, setting the album back. No one does. I don't talk about her much. He looked at me then, eyes soft. I guess I've spent so many years building things that I forgot how to live in them. The honesty in his voice made something in me crack. I understand, I said. I think I forgot too. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the fire, the faint ticking of a distant clock. Then he smiled faintly. Come. Dinner's ready. The dining room was candlelit, the kind of setting that belonged in movies. Randall had cooked, or maybe his staff had, but the meal was perfect. He poured wine and we talked. Really talked. About youth, dreams, the people we became instead of the people we planned to be. You know, he said, swirling his glass, I always thought about calling you. Every birthday, every New Year's Eve. But something always stopped me. What stopped you? He looked down, a smile playing at the corner of his lips. Fear, I guess. That you'd moved on. That I wasn't part of your world anymore. I felt my chest tighten. You were always part of my world, Randall. Even when you weren't in it. The words hung between us, delicate and dangerous. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. Warm. Firm. Familiar. Grace, he said softly, maybe we get another chance. My heart thudded. At what? At everything we lost. I didn't know what to say. The room felt smaller suddenly, the candlelight softer, the years between us melting like wax. But before I could answer, his phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't silence it. He glanced down, frowned, and his expression changed, guarded, tense. "Excuse me," he said, standing. "I have to take this." He walked out, voice low, urgent. I caught fragments. "Not now. I told you to wait, it's handled." When he returned, his calm mask was back in place, but something inside me knew, whatever that call was, it wasn't just business. After dinner, I went to bed restless. I couldn't shake the image of that woman in the photo. Eleanor Gray. The way he'd said her name. The way he'd gone quiet after the call. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what ghosts lived in Randall's house, and which ones had just been awakened by my return. When you reopen a heart that's been locked for decades, you have to be ready for what's inside. The next morning, I woke up uneasy. The dream I'd had was vivid and strange. Eleanor, the woman from the photo, was standing at the edge of Randall's garden, her hair blowing in the wind. She turned, smiled at me, and whispered something I couldn't hear before vanishing into smoke. I woke with my heart pounding and a chill that coffee couldn't shake. Randall was gone when I went downstairs. His housekeeper, a kind woman named Marisol, told me he had an early meeting in Atlanta, and wouldn't be back until the evening. He said for you to relax, make yourself comfortable, she added with a smile. I tried. I really did. But there's something about being alone in someone else's life that makes you feel both invisible and watched. Every sound, the creak of the stairs, the distant hum of the heating vents, felt amplified. The house was beautiful, but it had that hollow sound of a place meant to impress, not to be lived in. After lunch, curiosity got the better of me. There was one hallway I hadn't explored, the one at the far end of the second floor, behind a heavy oak door that was usually kept shut. When I'd asked about it before, Randall had simply said, "That wing isn't finished. I never go there." But the way he said it, the slight hesitation, the flicker of something in his eyes, made me wonder. So I went. The door creaked open, revealing a long, dim corridor lined with dust and silence. The air was cooler, stale. A faint smell of old wood and varnish lingered. As I walked deeper, my shoes echoed softly against the hardwood floor. Halfway down the hall, I saw a set of double doors with frosted glass panels. The glass was etched with a delicate pattern of vines. My hand hovered over the handle, hesitating. Then I pushed. The room beyond was frozen in time. A grand studio, with sunlight filtering through tall windows covered by sheer curtains. On one wall, a half-finished painting, Randall's face, or close to it, though younger, softer. On the opposite side, canvases stacked against the wall, most of them portraits of the same woman. Eleanor. Her face stared back at me from every angle, laughing, reading, painting, dancing in a garden. She was everywhere. And in the center of the room, beneath a dust sheet, was something large and rectangular. I pulled the cover away, my heart thudding. It was a painting of her and Randall, standing together, hands clasped, smiling. The signature in the corner read, E. Gray, 2018. The year she died. The sound of the front door startled me. I froze. Then I heard his voice echoing faintly down the hall. "Grace?" Panic fluttered in my chest. I quickly replaced the dust sheet and stepped away from the painting. When Randall appeared in the doorway, his expression changed instantly. Calm, polite Randall, his face tightened with something like pain. "I told you this wing was closed," he said quietly. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I didn't mean to. You shouldn't be in here." His voice wasn't angry, it was broken. I'd seen Randall confident, kind, even nostalgic. But never like this. He walked past me, pulling the curtains open. Light spilled across the room, illuminating the dust motes in the air. He stared at the paintings for a long time. "She loved this room," he said finally, his voice low. Eleanor. She was an artist. Said the light here was perfect. I stayed silent. She was the only person who really understood what I was trying to build, he continued. Not the business, not the houses, but something that meant something. She had a way of making everything feel alive. Even me. I watched his shoulders rise and fall, the tremor in his hands. You loved her, I said softly. He turned, eyes glistening. Yes. I did. But not the way I loved you. That made my breath catch. Randall. He stepped closer, his voice trembling slightly. You were my first love, Grace. You were the reason I wanted to become someone. But when I came back to find you, I blinked. You came back. He nodded slowly. A year after I left for Atlanta. I came home with a ring. I was ready to start the life I promised you. But when I got to your house, your mother told me you'd just married Robert. My throat closed. She never told me you came. I know, he said bitterly. I stood there on that porch, holding a damn ring in my pocket, while she smiled and told me you were happy. So I left. I told myself that was fate. That maybe I wasn't meant to have you. He took a deep breath, then looked around the room. Then I met Eleanor. She was brilliant. We built the company together. She loved me, but she knew, she always knew, part of me still belonged to someone else. I felt tears sting my eyes. And now she's gone. He nodded. Cancer took her fast. 2 months from diagnosis to, his voice faltered. I built this wing for her. She used to call it her sunroom. I closed it after she died. Haven't stepped in here since. Silence filled the space between us, thick with regret and something unspoken. I shouldn't have come in, I said quietly. No, he said, shaking his head. Maybe you should have. Maybe it's time I stopped hiding ghosts. He walked toward the painting again, resting his hand on the dust cover. You know, she used to tell me I'd see you again. Said you were the kind of person life always circles back to. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. That night, we had dinner in near silence. I could feel the distance in the air, like something had shifted between us. He wasn't angry, but he was somewhere far away in his mind, haunted. When I went upstairs, I stood for a long time at my bedroom window, staring out into the dark garden below. I could see the faint outline of the old oak tree near the gate, its branches swaying in the wind. Somewhere in that silence, I felt it, a pull. Like the past and present were about to collide. Downstairs, I heard a door close. Then Randall's voice, low and tense, speaking into the phone again. Not now, he said sharply. You don't understand, she's here. I can't just. A pause. Then, quieter, I said I'll handle it. The line went dead. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever ghosts haunted this house weren't just from the past. They were very much alive. Some homes are built from walls. Others, from unfinished goodbyes. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice on the phone, sharp, urgent, afraid. She's here. I can't just. Who was she? And what couldn't he handle? The longer I lay there in the dark, the louder my thoughts became. I tried to tell myself it was business. Randall was a man with a company, a reputation, responsibilities. But deep down, something didn't fit. That tone in his voice, it wasn't the voice of a businessman. It was the voice of a man cornered by something personal. At dawn, I gave up pretending to rest. I got dressed, crept downstairs, and poured myself coffee in the silent kitchen. Through the window, I could see the mist rolling across the garden, wrapping the world in soft grey. When I turned, Randall was standing in the doorway. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept either. "Morning," I said, forcing a smile. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Not much." He nodded slowly, his gaze flicking toward the window. "I'm heading out later. There's something I need to deal with." "Randall," I said quietly, "what's going on?" He hesitated. "Grace. I heard you last night," I said before I could stop myself. "On the phone." His jaw tightened. "You were listening. You were shouting." We stared at each other. The tension hung thick between us. Finally, he sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it." He leaned against the counter, the early light catching the silver in his hair. For the first time since I'd arrived, he looked old. Not in body, but in weariness. "There's something you need to know," he said. "About Eleanor." "About me." My heart pounded. "Go on." He took a breath. "When Eleanor got sick, we made some choices. Bad ones, maybe. She didn't have long, and I didn't want her to worry. I moved money, her shares in the company, into my name to protect them from her family. She wanted that. But after she died, her sister accused me of stealing. It became ugly. Lawyers, threats, gossip. I thought it was over. And the person you were talking to." His eyes met mine. "Her nephew. He's been calling for months, trying to blackmail me. He says he has proof I forged some documents. If that gets out, everything I built, everything, it's gone." The confession hung in the air. I stared at him, my mind racing. "So, all this time, you've been, what?" "Buying silence." He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Randall," I whispered, "why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to see me like this," he said softly. "You remember the man I was, the dreamer, the builder. I didn't want you to see the man who made deals in shadows, just to keep his empire standing." My heart broke a little. For him. For me. For everything between us that had already burned once before. "Empires fall," I said quietly. "But people can rebuild." He gave a sad smile. "Not at my age. You're not as alone as you think." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "I wasn't lying when I said I built this for you." I blinked. "What?" "This house," he said, glancing around. "After Eleanor died, I couldn't stand to live in our old place. So I bought this land. I designed it myself. Every wall, every window. I thought about you while I built it. About what you'd like, where you'd sit to read, where you'd drink your coffee in the morning. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, but I wanted to be ready if I did." My throat tightened. "Randall." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A gold locket, slightly tarnished. "I found this in my mother's attic a few years ago," he said. "You gave it to me the night before I left for Atlanta. I've kept it all this time." He opened it. Inside, a faded photo, me at 25, smiling shyly at the camera. I guess I've been waiting for this moment longer than either of us realized. I felt tears slide down my cheeks before I could stop them. "Randall," I said, my voice breaking, "you don't have to do this alone. The money, the company, none of that matters. What matters is you." He took my hand. "You really believe that?" "Yes," I said. "And maybe it's time you stopped running from the ghosts you built all this for." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he nodded slowly, like a man making peace with something buried deep inside. "I'll call the lawyers," he said. "I'll fix this properly." That night, the house felt lighter somehow. Like the air had shifted. Randall was quieter than usual, but calmer. I sat by the fire, thinking about everything we'd lost and everything we might still have left. When he came to join me, he carried 2 glasses of wine. He sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his shoulder. "You know," he said after a while, "when I saw you at that door, suitcase in hand, I thought I was dreaming." I smiled. "And when you said, you finally came home, I thought you meant the house." He shook his head, eyes soft. "No. I meant me." We sat in silence, watching the flames flicker. The firelight danced on his face, on the memories between us. Maybe we were both too old to start over, but not too old to find peace. I reached for his hand. "So, what happens now?" He smiled faintly. "Now? We start again. But this time, we don't make promises. We just live." And for the first time since the fire, since losing everything, I realized something. I wasn't lost anymore. I hadn't come back to rebuild a house. I'd come back to rebuild myself. Outside, the night was still. Inside, the fire crackled softly, and Randall's voice, warm, steady, real, broke the silence one last time. "Welcome home, Grace."